Today we're going over cards that played out a lot better than we initially thought they would. It's Overperformers.
I'm Mia, and I know about the no-no list.
I'm BZ, so do I, but you don't. And we're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. You'll know later. Card Kingdom is our sponsor, where you can buy Magic the Gathering singles, sealed product, and more. With $50 or more gives you free shipping. That's their slogan.
Absolutely. Just the way he said it. There are also sales on the site. There are picks that we have that you can see right here if you look at the right page. And they're just a great place to ship very, very fast. Card Kingdom. We're also sponsored by Moxfield. There will be an ad somewhere in the video. If you guess where it is and you said you got it right, you lied because you can't do that. Also, we're sponsored by Dragon Shield. They have the best sleeves in the multiverse.
That means good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS.
At the checkout, you can save 5% of your real money tax dollars on your entire order, including
the 25th anniversary sleeves. We have them over here. It is metallic. They got this awesome sheen on them. You can see them on screen because our editor is a nice person.
Yes, and we also have a Patreon if you've got stinky deck lists, or if you want to watch some gameplay, if you want to see some thoughts about what we have that we can't fit on the show, go check it out there. You can check out everything. We have a pretty big backlog at this point.
We'll upgrade your stinky decks, I think is what you left off.
Yes.
Go to Patreon if you have stinky decks. And we also have Overperformers for your viewing pleasure. These are cards that we made our initial opinions on when they came out, but over the course of time, they impressed us. They are actually better than we thought they were. Now, this is not just a list of good cards. Sometimes we think a card is garbage, and it ends up being okay. That's still an overperformer, if you ask me. So there might be one or two of those on this list. There might not be. I'm keeping you in the dark because we're going to go over them. The first one is Hideous Taskmaster. It is 7 in a red for a 7/2 with Devoid. When you cast this spell for each opponent, gain control of up to one target creature that player controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures. They gain Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1 until end of turn. Also, buried at the bottom, this thing has Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1. Oh my god, this card hits like an absolute truck. I love it so much. I thought it was good when it came out, but it's bonkers good.
I think I glazed over this when it first came out. I mean, a 7-mana spell in a format where there were free spells. There was Nadu. There was so much going on in MH3. 7 mana for a 7/2 is a lot to put down, but being able to steal those creatures, stapling on Annihilator 1, and if you're this late in the game already, giving everything Trample, taking all of your opponent's best creatures and giving them so many keywords, plus this also being able to swing, that is very powerful.
There's so much going on with this card, and I think I said it was 7 in red. It is 6 in a red. It's only 7 mana to get this effect. It's a cast trigger. When you cast this spell, you get to steal the cards. So even if they counter it, it doesn't matter. You get the best effect right away. You get an Annihilator 4's worth of stats of creatures. You don't have to send them any specific which way. You can send them all at one person if they're ahead. And this is Annihilator 4 on a surprise creature that they didn't see coming. There's no Haste Annihilator. That's not really a thing. This is Annihilator 4 divided up, which is even better, all at once. And it's just, everything has Trample, everything has Haste now. It's unreal how much damage this can put out. Easily 20 damage, but also the catching someone off guard, making them sacrifice is just absurd. And it helps a little bit. You're stealing one of their permanents that they could have maybe sacrificed. So even if you steal like a crappy 1/1, now maybe they have to sacrifice a land or a mana rock.
I mean, this is pretty nutty, right? Being able to get all of that power, but also if you have any sacrifice synergies, you know, like how people will play like Seize the Spotlight, for instance, and then sacrifice their opponent's creatures, giving them Annihilator 1, stealing them, giving them Trample, and then also sacrificing after that, that is insult to injury and what makes this card so good.
Oh my god, yeah. Could you imagine they've got like Mayhem Devil and they play Hideous Taskmaster and then the Annihilator trigger Mayhem Devil and then they sack all of the creatures that they stole, which triggers man.
Or sacrificing it to like Dargo or something. I know you love a good Dargo deck.
I do. So like any deck that's big monsters, 7 drops that cares about that sort of like bigger mana value, 4 or more power, sacrifice, like all of these decks would love this card, and it really is one of the hardest hitting cards I've ever seen.
I am very excited. I want to put it in a deck soon. Maybe Mahadi, if it's right in there.
Please put this in a deck, because Hideous Taskmaster is obscene.
I really want to check it out. The next one we have is one from my deck. It is Bonnie Paul Clear Cutter. 3 green, blue for a 6/5 with reach. When she enters, you create Bo, a legendary ox with this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, which ends up being a ton. Whenever you attack, you draw a card. Then you could put a land from either your hand or the graveyard onto the battlefield. I have this in my Uro deck, which is a lot of lands matters and a lot of landfall in general. But being able to get it from your graveyard has been even better than I thought it would be. I thought this would be a pretty good top end. This is a great top end.
I actually just missed that line of text. My first experience with Bonnie Paul was playing against it in like Thunder Junction Limited, where you just lost to it because it was a 6/5 and a 6/6 and it drew a card when it attacked. So like that already was like a bomb. I never got to experience the graveyard part. The first time Mia did this and she was like, oh, get back this other land that I milled before. I'm like, no, what do you mean? And then I had to read it. I was like, oh no, this is so much more annoying because, you know, it's possible to whiff with Bonnie pretty easily if you draw a card and then you don't have any lands in your hand. It's possible to miss that ramp. Nope, actually it's not because they stapled graveyard to it. So if you have even just an Evolving Wilds that you've played at any point in the game, you got Bonnie Paul every turn to just get back that Evolving Wild. So even in your budget deck, this thing
so
slaps.
good.
It's also like a really good division of the threats because it just throws all of the power and toughness into Bo, who scales with the game and maybe eventually will be kind of annoying. But then all of the text is on Bonnie Paul, and that's the thing you want to stop. You want to stop them from drawing cards and getting lands out. But even when you do that, now they're left with a 7/7 or whatever.
I mean, I also like it because it says whenever you attack, you don't have to attack with Bo. You don't have to attack with Bonnie Paul. If you have disposable 1/1s, you throw in, oh, there's an elf at you, a 1/1, and oh, I guess I get a card and a free land for my graveyard or my hand, which is absolutely amazing to begin with. And then Bo just gets better as you keep attacking and getting the Bonnie Paul triggers. It just kind of feeds into itself, and it's not that much mana to be playing into this. And also, Bonnie Paul's 6/5 with reach. That's a good blocker. That's a pretty good attacker, too, if you have a pretty clear board.
Yeah, I mean, Bonnie Paul just does a lot, and especially in a budget scenario, this card really does slap. It's just a good amount of stats, and you get your card back right away, which is nice. Another one that you've been super hyped on that I guess I will read is Invasion of Zendikar. When Invasion of Zendikar enters, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle. This has 3 defense. I literally, until this moment, did not know that it was called defense. I don't even know if it's called defense counters or if it's just 3 defense. 3 heart points, and it flips when you hit it into Awakened Skyclave. It's a creature. It's a 4/4 Vigilance Haste that is also a land as long as it's on the battlefield, and it taps for 1 mana of any color. So Mia, you've been a little bit high on battles. I think we were lower on battles when we first reviewed that set.
Yeah, I think I am somewhat high on battles. I think you need to play them in the right place, obviously. But I play this in Yarok, which is double entering the battlefield triggers. Being able to get 4 lands off of the Yarok trigger and this. But even if you're not playing with Yarok specifically, if you have any flicker synergies too, blue-green flicker, you can be able, if this goes to its creature side, you can flicker it, it comes back as the battle, and then you could get that ramp all over again. And then it also taps for mana as a creature, and you could tap it immediately as a creature. I think that this does a little bit of everything, and I think that if you're playing like Explosive Veggie or something like that, this is an easy swap to it, and it's also very budget, so it just does something like even better. I feel like this is a little bit of like the power creep, right? This is just doing it but better.
It's evolving, or it's Explosive Vegetation, but with 68 words on the back, and it turns out it's pretty good if you flip it. I think battles in general are really interesting because they fall into this design space where most of what the battles do are like reminiscent of sorceries, but they're permanents. So if you can, like Mia said, with any of the battles, even not just Invasion of Zendikar, you can flip them, then flicker the creature, and now it becomes that sorcery effect that you just get again. And of course, you can always get the creature back. And if you have a way to flicker just any permanent, great. Skip the whole part where you attack the battle. Just keep doing that. This thing and battles in general kind of have overperformed, and I'm happy about it because I think all of the invasions were really cool. I want to see more battles because now I've got my brewing juices flowing, and the gears are turning, and I wanna brew more.
I mean, I think battles, as we mentioned, are slept on. I mean, I love Invasion of Alara, as you guys might know, because I think that one is nutty, but it's very hard to play. But something like this, where it's just mono green, you get a little bit of ramp if you're playing enough basics, and then if you can flicker it or get double ETB triggers on it, even better, right?
Yeah, I mean, we also could just look at the face value without any funny business. 4 mana, go get 2 lands, and then attack it. If you can do that right away, if we're early in the game, you just get another land. That's 3 lands for 4 mana. That's pretty good. So also, I think Moxfield probably pretty good too. That's the next one on our Overperformers list. Moxfield, when we first got it, we thought this is a really good website. It's going to help me build decks faster. we were wrong because it's actually the greatest website to ever exist on the planet. This isn't even related to Magic anymore.
We love Moxfield. We've been talking a lot about budget or non-budget, but the way we track it is through Moxfield. You can see the price at the bottom, whether you're using Redacted or Card Kingdom, you could use both prices. And it's just a great way to keep track of your changes too. They actually have a full history of additions and removals.
What do we got next?
The next one we have is a card that I've been playing, and I know we were both very low on it when it came out, but it's actually put in a fair amount of work, I'd say. It's called Palantir of Ornithak. Maybe I got that wrong. Sorry, Lord of the Rings nerds. 3 mana for an artifact. At the beginning of your end step, you put an influence counter on it and scry 2. Then, target opponent may have you draw a card. If they don't, you mill X, where X is the number of influence counters on it, and that player loses life equal to the total mana value of those cards. I have this in my deck that revolves around like drawing a lot of cards, putting a lot of stuff into the graveyard, and then like reanimating it later to get a lot of value. And because I have a lot of like high mana sorceries in there, I felt like that I can either get extra draws off of this for 3 mana, or I could just hit people for a lot. But in the early stages of this, people are not going to let you get the card, which is fine. That makes sense, which means they'll take the damage. So if you have anything gigantic on top, that could be a full 5 to 8 damage in just one end step.
I will say I thought this card was pretty bad when it came out. I was like, this looks forgettable. I don't care. I'm not going to play it. But I have seen it enough where people are like loving this thing, and I think it's brought me up a little bit. I'm not loving it, but I do think it can be effective. The only problem I have with the card in general is that it gives your opponents a choice. If you need cards, guess what? You're not getting cards. And if you really need to deal damage, congratulations on drawing a card. So you can't always get exactly what you want, but I think it just does enough over the course of, like, you probably need this in play for 3 or 4 turns, but once you get that amount of turns with this card, it does get the value, and it's definitely worth 3 mana. So I should probably re-examine to see if I want to play this card in anything, but it earned itself a little bit of redemption for me.
I think it's pretty funny because BZ's also taken probably, I'd say, at least 30 damage from this card.
Snap take
and
damage.
It's not even just from me. There's like Jake and Joel, I think, were playing it at one point. We've played it with people at conventions. And in the first couple turns, when you only have 1 card to mill, you usually take the damage because
you're not getting a card out of me.
No,
mill the card. Let's go.
That's too free. But if you do let it, if you can proliferate counters, for instance, if you let it sit and play for too long, there's a point where you're far enough into the game, you have 3 or 4 counters on it, they're letting you get the card because the gamble is too high, especially since you are allowed to scry 2. It's not just 2 random ones off the top. You know, you're going to put 2 lands back and then just kind of roll with it, and 3 or 4 can really add up to maybe even half your life total.
Yeah, the scry 2 does also add up for dishing out damage with that. It's nice to have. Next up, we have Izoni, Center of the Web, 4 green-black for a 5/4 menace. Pretty chunky stats. When it enters or attacks, you may collect evidence 4, which is exile 4 or more mana value of cards from your graveyard. So that's pretty easy. If you do, you get 2/2/1 black and green spider creature tokens with menace and reach. So we're looking at 6 mana for 9 power, 6 toughness over 3 bodies. And you can also sacrifice 4 tokens, surveil 2, then draw 2 cards, you gain 2 life. So like at any moment, if I have 4 tokens, of which she gives me 2 for free, I can just start reading the bones, except I gain 2 life instead. Like, what? This card definitely impressed me. I thought it was kind of jank, and maybe it was going to be its own commander and nothing else. That's kind of where I had this card. But I've just been playing it, and at least in the middle power metas that we're in, this card slaps. It's not like, oh my god, don't play this in a combo meta, but it puts a ton of stuff on board, and if you're just a token deck, maybe any green-black token deck just wants this card.
I think that the sack 4 tokens, that makes it so easy. It doesn't care about what tokens you're sacking. So if you get them from like Academy Manufactor, one clue made with Academy Manufactor almost just gets you 2 cards almost, and then just surveilling 2 and gaining 2 life. That's a really good rate. And the fact that she does refund you, and the fact that it's also not just ETB, but it's also on attack too. I think that when you're able to ramp in green, you can get this out pretty fast. Collecting evidence 4 in the Golgari colors is incredibly easy, especially if you have your perpetual timepieces, or
Palantir?
Or if you have anything that could really just bin itself, or if you're already doing like flashback stuff to begin with. I think that it's very easy to be getting those collecting evidence, and I also think it's incredibly ezy to be sacking those 4 tokens.
Yeah, and if you get to attack with Izoni, which I think is reasonable because she is a 5/4 menace, it's a little bit tough to block. Now you've got 4 2/1s that also have reach so that you can chump block with them, but that alone is enough for Izoni's last ability. I think Ozoni was a little bit overlooked, certainly by us, maybe by you. So if you've got a green-black deck that maybe can make a few tokens, I think you should give it a try.
I definitely thought that this card was more of a commander card rather than a 99 card, but I think it has a lot more homes than we really realize. The next one is Innkeeper's Talent. The BZ was very high on this to begin with, and I think it's even better than we thought. 1 green for an enchantment, but it's a class, so you can upgrade it. Level 1 says, at the beginning of your turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. If you pay green, you go to level 2, which says, permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. And if you pay 3 and a green, you go to level 3. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many on that permanent or player instead. That is a lot of text. That is not that much mana over all the 3 levels. And I like the fact that you can pay it in increments because that is a very powerful effect.
I will say, I was thinking this card was going to be great in like a 1v1 sense. I might go as so far as to say that basically everybody underrated this card at first. I don't think it's a busted card, but I think it's undeniably pretty good, and there's no universe where this card should have pre-ordered for like $2. Like, you know what I mean? This is a $20 card, and looking at it now, I go, oh, obviously, like, of course, it's a doubling season and the last mode that also throws ward around, and at the baseline, which is 2 mana, you just get to throw down a counter every turn. Like, this thing just does too much to not be good. And I think everybody just sort of like overlooked it. You know, Bloomborough had all the cute little critters, but the classes had some hidden heaters in them.
I mean, word 1 is so annoying, and getting that for 3 mana along with putting the 1/1 counter at the beginning of combat on your turn, each combat, or like each of your combats, that's pretty powerful. And I don't think, if you're not at the level 3, I don't think people will be trying to snipe this directly.
I will.
I know BZ will, but I think that what I mean is I think it can fly under the radar.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It's a low investment, even if it does die, because you're getting counters each turn, and you pay 2 mana for it. Maybe you paid 1 extra mana to level it up before you go nuclear and play a Planeswalker and win. I think the only confusing thing about this card, and feel free to correct me wrong if I'm wrong in the comments, but oftentimes to level up classes, I put a die on it. And it says permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1, but I don't think levels are counters. I don't think it's a level counter. I think it says gain a level. So just like, don't think that this thing has ward 1, because I'm pretty sure it won't.
Unless you could put some other type of counter on it.
Right, if you put like a +1 counter. But I don't think the die that we use to talk about levels is counters. Again, I might be wrong, but I don't think so. That's just a note for the card. What do we got next?
The next one we have is a card that I've been playing. It's Dorael, Voice of Zalfir. 2 blue-green for a 3/3. Beginning of combat on your turn, up to 1 target land you control becomes an XX green and blue bird with flying haste, where X is the number of cards in your hand, but it's also a land. Whenever a land creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. I think that this card is great as a commander, but I put it into the 99 of my Uro deck, and I think it's gotten me card advantage. I think that the gigantic, if you can keep a big hand, the gigantic flyer with haste is very, very important. But if you get like things from Awaken the Woods or Dryad Arbor or any other type of land creatures that you might have hanging around, getting those extra cards too, you can stack multiple cards from this 1 card alone.
Yeah, this doesn't just say whatever thing she created draws a card when it hits. It's any land creature. So if you throw down a, like you said, Awaken the Woods, or you throw down a Root Awakening or something.
Yeah, Restless Spires or something like that.
You're living the dream. This card, my thing with this card is, how many times does it have to beat me before I realize, okay, maybe I underrated it? Because at least 3 times now it has mopped the floor with me. I don't want to spoil the Extra Turns episode we were on, but Josh Lee Kwai knows what he did with this thing. It was absurd.
A crime, even.
And I think just kind of in these green-blue landfall type decks, this thing just kind of slaps. It does sort of like demand a land be used for something other than mana. It's not mandatory, though. So, if you've got something better to do, sure, that's going to be something that's very strong. It doesn't force you to do that. But ultimately, it's like, deal 6 damage, draw a card for tapping a land. Yeah, you would just do that most of the time. Plus, there's upside.
I mean, most of the time, you're also playing this in decks where you can afford to pay that. Usually, in
like
these,
with Ramp, yeah.
Yeah, with landfall decks and that sort, the lands already did their job by coming in. It's only gravy now that they're hitting you for 10 in the air.
It really is. Okay, this next one is the origin of the no-no list. And I never expected this card to be so unbelievably annoying for my opponents. It's Inventive Iteration. It is 3 and a blue for an enchantment saga. Chapter 1, return up to 1 target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. Chapter 2, return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. If you can't, you draw a card. And Chapter 3 is exile it, then flip it into a creature, which is Living Breakthrough. It's a 3/3 Moonfolk enchantment creature with flying. Whenever you cast a spell, your opponents can't cast spells with the same mana value as that spell until your next turn, which is what I love to call the no-no list. So when this thing flips, you get a 3/3 body, and now I'm going to cast a Signet and a 4-drop. I write down on the no-no list 2 and 4. And for the whole turn cycle, nobody can cast those things. And that's a pretty good final mode. But as you go through the saga, you get your card's worth. You get to bounce something, which is a little bit annoying for that person. They might have to invest 4 or 5 mana to replay it. Then you draw a card. You either get an artifact back, which is a card, or you just draw a new card. That's totally cool. And now even if this thing dies, I go, that's fine with me. And then it flips into the really annoying thing that's just like, I'm going to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 5-drop. Figure it out. Your whole game plan is like skewed now.
I don't even care about the first 2 modes. You play those first 2 modes. That's fine with me. The third mode is so annoying. BZ plays so many spells in a single turn. I'm just saying.
That's just what I do.
Yeah,
no
that's
matter
just
what
how
deck I'm
BZ
playing.
plays overall. So it's like, okay, here's my it doesn't even matter. Here's my Wayfarer's Bauble, and here's my Signet, and here's my 3-drop that I just have been chilling in my hand. And I guess you guys can only play one big spell next turn because 1 through 3 is blocked off. And that's very annoying, especially if it's for 3 players. It's tough for 1, but I have, since I am usually the one on the other side of this, I have conspired with the rest of the table to kill this one card because it gets that obnoxious.
Yeah, and this was a card that I love. I love finding cards like these because I threw it in as a completely speculative test for like half meme. It was like 50% meme. But playing it, it's actually really been great. And now I'm considering, do I want to play this card in other decks? Like what other decks might want to use this? And I'm kind of happy about it. I want to, sorry, I guess that you're going to have to play against this more,
It's
but
fine.
it slaps.
I mean, I think that the perfect home for this is if you can get it to its final mode as quickly as possible, and then if you have like Cascade or casting spells for free, because
Cantrips.
yeah, if you can just be able, like, if you can pull in like an Aminatu's Augury off this or something, and then you have like a 5, a 4, a 6, and then get all that, and then you just have a couple mana for like a 1 and a 2, your opponents are locked out for like the whole next turn cycle.
Let me make the most dramatic comparison, and then we can move on. This is basically Bracella, because all you have to do is cast a 1, 2, and 3, and it's basically Bracella. Was that good? Was that good for clicks?
Sure, maybe.
Did you click on this?
Sure,
Thanks.
I'm sure that was the reason why they clicked on this. But it is actually very annoying to deal with, and people, I think you might want to use removal on this, especially if you do chain a lot of little things together. It's way more disruptive than you'd really think.
Right, and then even in that scenario where you go, oh my god, it's going to flip, let's kill it, I bounced a 5-drop to your owner's hand, cool, and I drew a card or got back my best artifact. Like, I'm fine with this trade.
It's so obnoxious, but
It sure is. Who better to play obnoxious cards than me?
oh, you're the most obnoxious man ever.
So what do we got the next card?
The next card is Whirler Rogue. It's 2 blue for a 2/2. When he enters, you create 2 1/1 Thopters with flying. If you tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, target creature can't be blocked this turn. I thought this was like, okay, this is a pretty good card. It's been very good. I think it can go into a lot of different decks, especially if you can just blink and make a couple artifact tokens, which a lot of the artifact decks can do. And I do also like the fact that target creature can't be blocked this turn. It doesn't say your creatures. If someone's going to have the lethal blow on someone because of commander damage, you could go, okay, well, it can't be blocked. You deal with it.
Yeah,
and then just
did
have
I
them
do
die.
that?
Yeah, so I think this is it's so much better than I really thought it would be in the combat metas.
And this was, this thing came out forever ago. And I think for me, about a year or two ago, it really rose up in the ranks of like, no, this card just is pretty sweet. It's pretty good. And I almost don't even care what context I see it in. It's just an efficient rate. It's probably one of my all-time favorite commander designs just ever, based on the effect it has in the game, the trickiness of it, the low requirement to put this card in your deck. You probably want other artifacts, but it does fuel itself.
I mean, also in a pinch, I have just copied this because I had nothing better to copy, and then I just have 4 power on the board, and 2 because of him and 2 other ones, and then 2 of those power fly. It's easy to chip and damage. It's easy to, tap the Thopters so things can't block. I don't know. I feel like it does a little bit of everything, and I really like that.
I'm a huge fan of this card. It is a card that I think, similar to a Zoni, is like, don't put this in your combo decks. But it is a very efficient card. It's just a Swiss Army knife. You can absolutely surprise people out of nowhere with the, oh, you're being attacked by a 10/10. that's a shame. Unblockable. I was like, gotcha.
Anyways, you have a swords, hopefully, right?
Yeah, and this is one of my all-time favorite like Commander Cube cards. It will never not be in there. It's a very, very fun Magic card. Mia, what's your next one that you've played with recently?
The next one is Annex, Hardened in the Forge. I feel like both with Roller Rogue and this one, I didn't really respect them when I was doing Commander Masters draft, but putting them into decks that I play pretty consistently made me respect them more. 1 red for a star 4, and his power is equal to your devotion to red. Whenever he or another non-token creature you control dies, you create a 1/1 satyr that can't block. If the creature that died had power 4 or greater, you create 2 of those little devils instead. I thought this was kind of filler in Mahadi. I was like, okay, well, he makes a couple bodies, that's fine. I have a lot of like tokens and stuff. It doesn't really matter. This has made so many more bodies, especially if you can pump those creatures' power for any reason, but because they're just like, it's just like your entire board explodes, and then if you can sacrifice all of those little guys, or if you will just be dealing so much damage all around. I've had this with like, what's his name? Like Sanguinary Priest, you know, the one that has lifelink and,
Pings.
Pings. And then with like Mayhem Devil out and stuff, this has dealt so much damage across the board, especially if like Mirkwood Bats too, the entering, and then if you can sacrifice them or creating and sacrifice. I don't know. This has done a lot more than I thought for 3 mana.
I think what sends this over the edge, because it's kind of easy to compare it to some of the other cards, which, again, they're not even super plentiful, but the cards that say when your creatures die, you get a thing. It's like, all right, this is pretty comparable to those, but I think what pushes it even further is that if they're 4 or greater, you get 2, and that is almost always going to manifest at least with Anax dying and giving you 2 satyrs. So it just like ends up being extra math, extra damage. When you play all these aristocrat cards, if that's the environment you want to use this in, you're holding people hostage faster by just saying, here's my board, pass. I have a Sack Owlet and a Zulapur Cutthroat. If you try to mess with me, Anax is going to be my guy, and my whole team is going to explode, and you're going to die.
In response to, like, a bunch of stuff that has been trying to kill me, I would sack my entire board, get a bunch of things, sack those again, and
sack
then
Anax last.
And then just kill everyone, or kill the person who's trying to threaten me. This is kind of like a smoking gun, right?
It really is. Anax, I feel bad for him, because in the lore, he got, like, brainwashed by Perforos. But his first version, nobody was really clamoring to play that. So, Anax, welcome home, buddy.
He's a good card, and I highly recommend you try it out.
If you want to see more good cards, there's actually a video all about good cards, I think made just for you, honestly. If you want to click that right here.